Sprinkle me with perfume rare, and I'll be on my way.
In the golden age of Hollywood, some stars become legends. Bogart, Cagney, Davis, Flynn, their names are practically synonymous with the movies themselves. But for every star that's still a household name, there's another who has faded, their light almost completely extinguished by time. This is the story of one of those forgotten stars. A man who, for a short but brilliant time, was the absolute king of his studio. His handsome face and golden voice were everywhere. By every measure, he was a massive success. And yet, today, most people have no idea who he is. His name is a trivia question for all but the most hardcore classic film buffs. This isn't just a story about fame fizzling out. It's a story about a deliberate, almost calculated erasure. It's the story of a star so perfectly made for his time that when that time was over, Hollywood had to forget him in order to move on. In the 1940s, Warner Brothers was a kingdom of huge personalities. It was the studio of tough guys and femme fatales, churning out gritty crime dramas and epic adventures. And at the center of it all, one actor's popularity was simply off the charts. Studio lore says that for 6 years straight, he got more fan mail than any other star on the lot. Not Humphrey Bogart, not James Cagney, not even the dashing Errol Flynn. The man who captured the public's heart was an actor with a shy smile, twinkling eyes, and a stunning tenor voice. His name was Dennis Morgan. He was the perfect romantic lead, the clean-cut hero, the handsome, reliable face in dozens of Warner Brothers movies. One critic called him the antithesis of the gritty Bogart. He was safe, well-mannered, and incredibly likable. For a nation at war, he was the ideal movie star, a symbol of the decent American man. From 1943 to 1949, he was one of the studio's most bankable stars. So why, when you think of the giants of that era, does his name barely ring a bell? He's become a phantom of the studio system. This isn't just a case of a star's light dimming. This is the story of how the very industry that built Dennis Morgan into a phenomenon systematically dismantled his legacy. To understand how Hollywood erased Dennis Morgan, we first have to understand how it created him. Before he was Dennis Morgan, the polished movie star, he was Earl Stanley Morner, born in Prentice, Wisconsin in 1908. He was a world away from the sound stages of Burbank. His father supplied lumber camps, but his mother and aunt nurtured his real talent, a beautifully trained tenor voice that he showed off in school plays and local operas. He went to Carroll College, where he met his future wife, Lillian Vedder. They'd met in high school and stayed married for 61 years until his death. After college, he did a little bit of everything. He was a radio announcer in Milwaukee, a sportscaster for the Green Bay Packers, and a singer on the radio in Chicago, all the while honing that charming, easygoing persona. In the mid-1930s, he headed to Los Angeles. His first stop was MGM, where, still known as Stanley Morner, he was just another face in the crowd. In a bit of heavy irony, one of his first uncredited roles was in The Great Ziegfeld, where he had to lip-sync to another singer's voice. The man with the golden tenor was literally being silenced. After a few small parts, MGM still didn't know what to do with him. A move to Paramount came next, along with a new name, Richard Stanley. But real stardom wasn't happening there either. He was just another handsome contract player waiting for his big break. That break came in 1939. When he signed with Warner Brothers, it was here they finally landed on the name Dennis Morgan. But he wasn't exactly treated like a future king. As one film historian put it, the studio put him on an assembly line with Wayne Morris, Arthur Kennedy, Jeffrey Lynn, Eddie Albert, and Ronald Reagan, likable young lugs squiring the heroine, till Bogart, Cagney, or Flynn came crashing down to sweep her up. He was the dependable second choice, the handsome but not too threatening guy. He was cast in a string of B movies and supported bigger names like James Cagney in The Fighting 69th. He was professional and good-looking, But he wasn't a star. Not yet. The role that changed everything came from a loan out to RKO in 1940. He was cast opposite Ginger Rogers in Kitty Foyle. Rogers was determined to prove she was more than Fred Astaire's dance partner, and she poured everything into the role, eventually winning an Oscar for Best Actress. The movie was a huge hit, and Morgan, playing the charming socialite who breaks, her heart was suddenly in the spotlight. Warner Brothers finally realized what they had on their hands. The era of Dennis Morgan was about to begin. The success of Kitty Foyle was the rocket fuel Dennis Morgan's career needed. When he returned to Warner Brothers, he was no longer just a supporting player, he was a star. The studio started casting him opposite their biggest female leads like Bette Davis in This Our Life and Ida Lupino in The Hard Way. But it was musicals where he really shone. Morgan had a legitimate, trained tenor voice, and the studio finally decided to use it. In 1943, he starred in a lavish Technicolor remake of The Desert Song. The plot was updated to include Nazis, making Morgan a heroic, singing resistance leader. It was pure wartime escapism, and audiences ate it up. The Desert Song was Warner Brothers' highest-grossing film of the year, making Morgan a major box office draw and, for a time, the highest-paid actor at the studio. He followed this with a string of hits that cemented his persona, the likable, charming singing hero. He starred with Ann Sheridan in Shine On, Harvest Moon, 1944, and most famously with Barbara Stanwyck in the holiday classic Christmas in Connecticut, 1945. As the war hero Jefferson Jones, Morgan was the picture of charm and romance. The film is still a beloved Christmas staple and a cornerstone of his legacy today. It was during this time that his popularity truly exploded. As hard as it is to believe now, fan mail was a huge deal, and according to Studio Buzz, for 6 years straight, he received more of it than any other star at Warner Brothers. In an era of tough guys like Bogart and Cagney, Morgan was something different. Aspirational but accessible, handsome but not dangerous. He was a comforting, clean-cut ideal that resonated with wartime audiences. Adding to his fame was his on-screen partnership with another Wisconsin native, Jack Carson. Starting in 1943, they were paired in a series of films, becoming Warner Brothers. Answer to Paramount's Bing Crosby and Bob Hope. The formula was simple. Morgan was the smooth singer who got the girl, and Carson was the loudmouth sidekick who got the boot. They starred in buddy comedies like Two Guys from Milwaukee, 1946, and Two Guys from Texas, 1948, and their real-life friendship created a chemistry audiences loved. In 1947, he starred in My Wild Irish Rose, a biopic of tenor Chauncey Olcott. It was another smash hit, earning an Oscar nomination for its music. The next year, theater owners voted him the 21st most popular star in the country. By every metric, he was at the absolute peak of his fame. He was the king of the Warner lot. But the system that built him was about to implode, and Dennis Morgan's career was about to crumble with it. For decades, Hollywood studios were all-powerful empires. They didn't just make the movies, they owned the distribution companies and the theaters that showed them. This was the studio system. Actors were signed to long-term contracts, and their images were carefully manufactured. A studio like Warner Bros. Didn't just employ Dennis Morgan, it owned the idea of Dennis Morgan, the clean-cut singing hero. That entire world came crashing down in 1948. A Supreme Court decision, United States v. Paramount Pictures, Inc., declared that the studio's ownership of theaters was an illegal monopoly and ordered them to sell them off. The golden age of the studio system was over. Without guaranteed theaters to show their films, studios couldn't afford to make as many movies or keep so many actors under contract. The assembly line was shut down. Actors became freelancers, jumping from project to project. For a star like Dennis Morgan, this was a disaster. His entire career was a product of that studio machine. He was the perfect contract player, talented, professional, and compliant. He did whatever work he was assigned, but that reliability, once an asset, was now a weakness. At the same time, American culture was changing. The moral clarity of World War II was giving way to the anxieties of the Cold War. Audiences got tired of simple, wholesome heroes. They wanted something more complex, more dangerous, more real. This was the dawn of the anti-hero. A new breed of method actors was taking over. Marlon Brando, James Dean, and Montgomery Clift brought a raw emotional intensity to the screen that was the exact opposite of Morgan's polished charm. Their performances felt less like acting and more like being. Suddenly, Dennis Morgan's persona, the likable, clean-cut, easygoing, but essentially uncharismatic young man, felt old-fashioned. Grit was in, and Morgan was anything but gritty. The very things that made him Warner Brothers' most popular star now made him look like a relic. He was built for a world of black and white morality, and he was now stuck in a world of gray. His contract, once a sign of his success, now felt like a golden cage, trapping him in an image that was going out of style. Dennis Morgan's career didn't end with a bang. It was a slow, quiet fade. The A-list projects just started to dry up. He was still making movies in the early 1950s like Perfect Strangers and Painting the Clouds with Sunshine, but they didn't have the same impact as his earlier work. The era of the grand musical was over. You can see the erasure happening in real time. In 1952, studio head Jack Warner reportedly wanted to get out of Morgan's expensive contract. So he assigned him to a low-budget B-movie western called Cattle Town, probably assuming the A-list star would refuse the demeaning role, giving the studio a reason to fire him. But Morgan, ever the professional, called their bluff. He showed up, made the movie, and collected his paycheck. It was a quiet act of defiance, but it only delayed the inevitable. His contract with Warner Brothers ended soon after, and he was on his own. He became a freelancer, but the roles were mostly in B-pictures like The Gun That Won the West, 1955, and Uranium Boom, 1956. The man who was once king of the lot was now working for bottom-of-the-barrel studio units. The industry that had celebrated his wholesome image now saw it as a problem. The new ideal of Hollywood masculinity was aggressive and dangerous, and Morgan's gentle quietness just couldn't compete. He later admitted his own mistakes. "My mistake was I stayed at one studio too long," he reflected. "I turned down early television believing then that people should pay to see us." It was a common feeling among movie stars, but a fatal error. While others found new careers on TV, Morgan only appeared in a few guest spots on shows like Alfred Hitchcock Presents. The erasure was cultural, too. As film history was being written, he was often left out. He was seen as a utility player, a pleasant but bland presence. One obituary summed it up with a subtly brutal line. For all his undoubted star potential, Morgan was perhaps cast once too often as the likable, clean-cut, easygoing, but essentially uncharismatic young man who typically loses his girl to someone more sexually magnetic. His persona was so tied to the 1940s that when the decade ended, so did his relevance. He wasn't a rebel like Bogart or a unique talent like Cagney. He was the system's perfect creation, and when the factory closed, he became a discontinued model. Hollywood didn't just move on. It forgot him because he was a reminder of a past it desperately wanted to escape. While Hollywood was forgetting Dennis Morgan, he was busy doing something very un-Hollywood, living a happy, normal life. There was no tragic fade into poverty or scandal. He simply moved on. When his film career fizzled out in the late 1950s, he focused on business. He had invested his money wisely in real estate, oil, and cattle. He gracefully transitioned from actor to rancher, settling down in Madera County, California. The man who once lit up the screen found contentment in the quiet life. He once said, It's not the easiest thing in the world to be a success in Hollywood and still be the ordinary husband and father. But he managed it. His 61-year marriage to his high school sweetheart Lillian was a picture of stability. They had 3 children and built a life far away from the industry that had cast him aside. He never seemed bitter. He understood the nature of the business that had both made and unmade him. He spent years as a spokesman for the American Cancer Society after his close friend and co-star, Jack Carson, died from the disease in 1963. He also dedicated himself to creating play spaces for children, believing that a kid with no place to play already has 2 strikes against him. In 1959, he spearheaded a campaign to create a public park in La Crescenta, California, which was poignantly named Two Strike Park in honor of his efforts. Dennis Morgan passed away on September 7, 1994, at the age of 85. He died not as a forgotten actor, but as a beloved husband, father, and community member who lived a full life on his own terms. So what is his legacy? Was he just a victim of changing times? A star with an expiration date? Maybe. But perhaps Hollywood had to forget him. To make room for the brooding complexity of Brando and Dean, the industry needed to push away the uncomplicated sincerity that Morgan represented. He was so perfectly a symbol of the studio system's wartime optimism that he became a ghost of its past. His story isn't a Hollywood tragedy, it's a quiet, cautionary tale about fame itself. It shows how an industry can build a king and then, when the cultural winds change, quietly write him out of the history books. Dennis Morgan survived Hollywood by being bigger than his own fame, but his erasure leaves us with a question. How many other stars, whose faces once lit up the silver screen, have been quietly forgotten, their legacies buried by the relentless march of time and taste? The story of Dennis Morgan is just one of countless untold tales from Hollywood's golden age. If you want to uncover more stories of the stars the industry left behind, subscribe to our channel and let us know in the comments which forgotten star's story you think we should tell next.